Welcome, everyone, to our conversation today. It carries on with our Leading with Purpose, and we're going to have a great conversation here today with three CEOs. I'll introduce them now. The first is CEO of Microsoft, Satya Nadella, the President and CEO of Walmart, Doug McMillon, and the President and CEO of Waste Management, Jim Fish. Welcome, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So we have a lot to cover today, and so figured we'd just go ahead and get started and start with the theme of today, which is leading with purpose. And certainly in 2020, that really took center stage. And so would love maybe to start with you, Jim, if you could think of one word to describe 2020 and one word to describe where you see us headed over the next 5 to 10 years.
Well, I might surprise you a little bit. My word for 2020 would be distracting. I'll tell you why in a second. And then my word for the next 5 to 10 years. I think it was distracting because literally overnight our business changed, as did most businesses. We were down 15, 20% in our volume in March and April. And we were rightly focused on some really, really critical issues, still focused on those critical issues. But we also had to take care of our customers and those constituents that we take care of every day. So it was a bit distracting. And I think as we look to the future, I don't believe 2020 and 2021 are going to be as much of an anomaly. I think they may end up being more, the mainstream. And so I think we have to learn how to multitask as leaders.
That's great. Satya?
My word probably would be resilience. It picks up a little bit about what Jim said, because I think it's pretty stunning to sort of think about the level of economic activity or in general productivity we were able to sustain in spite of just the constraints that were put. And so that, I think, broadly, both human resilience and also the technology that was involved, that's the word I would pick, at least for what the last year has been. And if I had to look forward, I think it's optimism and innovation. That's two words I realize, but I think it's optimism because of the innovation, not just in a narrow sense of innovation, the broad innovation across every sector of our society and our economy. So that's what I would sort of say is my word for the next 10 years.
Great. How about you, Doug?
If you'd asked me a few months ago, I would have said challenge. I think now I'll go with the word persistence, because the issues that we face are going to require a lot of persistence for us to work through them. Looking ahead, the word is regenerative. I think whether it's the planet or our communities, we're going to need to find ways to get back and strengthen them and do it in an inclusive way.
That's great. I think regenerative really describes a lot of what we're trying to tackle when we think about the climate crisis and the environment, which is certainly a topic of yesterday's session and now today. So let's talk a little bit about that. You know, the climate crisis, it's one where, you know, if you go back to January or February of 2020, it was getting a lot of discussion. Certainly with COVID, it was still there, but maybe wasn't as top of mind. And when we think about where we're going to head in solving some of the biggest problems when it comes to the climate crisis, what are some of the specific things that each of your organizations are doing to tackle this big issue? And maybe start with you, Doug.
Yeah, the themes relate to waste elimination, renewables, and the things related to climate and carbon, and then our whole supply chain as it relates to selling products and packages that are more sustainable. Our work continues in those areas. And we did make some new commitments in September related to becoming a regenerative company. We set some new targets, some new goals layered on top of the ones from the past. We want to have net zero emissions without any offsets by 2040. We've committed to protect or renew 50 million acres of land and 1 million acres of ocean by 2035. And then we have some zero waste targets in our key markets by 2025 that we're working to hit. So we've made progress, and as your other companies do that are represented here, we put these goals out. We put work against them, work with our suppliers and other partners to make them happen, and then report on those regularly in a transparent way. And When we make it, we celebrate for a second and move on. And when we don't make it, we try to explain what we learned and then recommit and double down.
It's interesting, too, because what you touched on in there is collaboration, and your business is so heavily dependent, too, on the supply chain, and Walmart certainly makes a big impact there, not just within your business, but there's certainly a halo effect.
We try to take advantage of that in a positive way, and our supplier base is willing, ready, and able. I mean, a lot of them are already like-minded. And going back to the work that we kicked off in 2005, we had a bunch of suppliers jump in then. Their mindsets changed just like ours did. So as we do this work now, it's kind of fun, actually, to collaborate together, set targets together, and hold each other accountable.
What about you, Satya?
In fact, we started 2020 before, in fact, the COVID crisis with some very bold commitments around carbon. And, 1 year in, I feel that we're making good progress, whether it is about being carbon negative, in our case, by 2030, or being water positive, zero waste, also developing this planetary scale computing platform. Of course, Microsoft is one participant here, and I think Doug talked about it. It will take all of us to do our part and in our ecosystem, and that's pretty much our approach. If you look at it, even in fact last week we talked about how we purchased 1.3 million metric tons of carbon removal this past fiscal year across 26 projects. But the interesting thing is not just what we did. We took all of the processes there, the RFPs, and just open sourcing it. So this is a way for us all to share the best practices as we march towards, I think, what are bold goals across all of our organizations. And it's going to take all of those efforts together.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I think, there's a thread here, given what Microsoft does, to the connectivity thread that carries through. Jim, how about you?
Well, for us, as you know, Tara, I mean, sustainability is such an integral part of what we do every day. So it's an opportunity for us as I look at it. And you're right, the climate is a crisis. So part of the answer to that is sustainability. And as we look at not only how to become more sustainable, but also create greater shareholder value, we're looking at things like alternatives for disposal and how do we use technology to improve our recycling process and things like that. I do have a question for you two guys. I mean, as we think about innovation and we think about collaboration, by the way, Satya, thanks for your Teams product, because it has been a lifesaver for us on those lines. But how do we not lose that collaboration? I mean, you're probably like we are. Most of our folks are not here in the office. They're working from home, and that's where they're using the Teams product. But how do we not miss out on those impromptu conversations that I think are so valuable?
Yeah, I mean, a couple of things. One thing that Doug has always reminded me is, listen, for everybody who's working from home, there are people on the front line, whether it's in retail, whether it's in healthcare. So in some sense, one of the things coming out, I think, Jim, out of this crisis is we're going to recognize that you can, in fact, connect, for example, a frontline worker to an engineer working from home. So you can transcend space to bring the right expertise, the right skills, to get stuff done across the world. So I think, to your point, I don't think we're going to remain in this constrained environment, but we are going to come out of this with some real structural change, because the assumptions of what can and cannot happen remotely are going to be changed forever. That doesn't mean people are not going to be in the front lines. I think the key word for me going forward is flexibility. All of us as leaders will have to work with the workforce and customers who are going to expect a lot more flexibility in how and when and who shows up to fix anything and help with anything. And so that's why even technologies like Teams, it's not about usage during this time. In fact, work happens in meetings, but the reality is work happens before meetings and after meetings. So thinking about continuous workflow, driving productivity is going to be key.
Yeah.
Yeah, I totally agree with all of that. I just maybe add that I think the speed and pressure of this year have taught us all just how quickly we can move, and it kind of removed bureaucracy automatically. And so now we've all seen what that looks like, and we don't want to let that go. That pace, that ability to make a call and move on and solve problems. And for some time now, it's felt to me like that the jobs that we all do are really just problem-solving jobs. If you wake up every morning and you think about your purpose and what you're trying to accomplish, your values, you just have a new set of problems that emerge all the time. And together with the team, you're just trying to solve them. And the bigger ones you can solve, the better, and the faster you can solve them, the better. And I don't think that's going to change, but we will do it in a more flexible way and hopefully learn how to bring all this together. You know, I think we've relied on historic relationships within our company that brought trust when this thing started. We all knew each other, we trusted each other, we could go fast. But being apart for a year, think about new associates. You know, how do they connect into that fabric of trust? And so I think on the other side of this, we will be together in person frequently as we shape our culture and all those things, but we'll also use technology, including Teams, to connect remotely when we should, and we'll learn when to do which.
Yeah, and a lot of those comments really highlight culture, which I want to come back to in a moment. But in the meantime, struck by, Satya and Doug, you each became CEO in about 2014, Jim in 2016. And I'd love to hear from you about how you've seen the transition of what our stakeholders want and what they want really out of a corporation when we think about some of the big problems like that we have to solve related to the environment and also to broader societal problems. How have you seen the role of a corporation change over that time period, and where do you see it headed?
One of the definitions, in fact, I read it, I think maybe a couple of years ago by an Oxford economist by the name of Colin Mayer. It goes, creating profit. He sort of talks about the social purpose of a company or a corporation as finding profitable solutions to the challenges of people and planet. And I like that because the key phrases being profitable solutions and the challenges of people and planet. And that's what I think all of us are, in the business for. And to me, the core, and I also think that before one goes to ESG, one has to sort of ask the question of what's the core business model, the core operation itself. Is it aligned with the world, right? When you do well, are communities and countries and the planet around you doing well? And so to me, that's, I think, at the center of what I try to sort of focus on, which is when Microsoft does well, how are we contributing, in our case, to that digital transformation, creation of innovation, broadly democratizing access to digital capability everywhere in the world, right? That and driving economic growth and prosperity. And of course, I think Doug referenced this and Jim talked about this. I think going forward, though, in order to solve some of the big challenges out there, we also need to make sure that that economic growth is more equitably distributed, right? And you can think about it as all industries, or you just can't have a couple of companies on the West Coast of the United States or the East Coast of China. It has to be much more broader economic prosperity. It has to be not just about knowledge workers with big college degrees, but even first-line workers. So we have to sort of think about how do we have more equitable growth. How do we make sure that, in our case, there's trust in technology? Let's face it, right now, whether it's cybersecurity, privacy, AI, ethics, internet safety, these are big issues. We need to really do our job. And everyone needs to do their work in order to grow more trust in technology. The planet, that's after all the topic today. Anything that you do in terms of your core business operation needs to be aligned with the planet and its future. And lastly, it has to also be about all of us doing our best work to deal with some of the biggest issues. In our case, let's say the democracy, right? All of us exist here as successful companies because our democratic system and the institutions are super important. So therefore, all that we can do to support those institutions and that institutional strength. So that's how I look at it, the core mission and the core business model, but also going beyond that across these dimensions.
Doug, to you.
Yeah, the way it feels here is that, like with any startup in the beginning, we were really focused on customers and associates all the way back to like 1962, and communities mattered, and we thought about other stakeholder groups, but those two were primary. And then in like 2005, some things happened that led to a real perspective change in the company, and they were sparked by the company's response to Hurricane Katrina in New Orleans when the flooding occurred there. And we saw something and had been studying multi-stakeholder capitalism a bit and thinking about the environment differently when that happened. And we pivoted at that time to really think about all the stakeholder groups in an equal kind of way. And I think by the time we get to 2020, 2021, Walmart's behaving in a multi-stakeholder way. And so when Business Roundtable started thinking about a revised statement of capitalism to Walmart and to many other companies, it felt like we were already doing that. I'm sure it felt that way to Jim and Satya too. It's like, well, yeah, this is what we do. We had evolved, I think, not realizing just how much of an evolution had occurred, and that lens that we had become more long-term is the way that I would think about it. If you cannot have happy associates, you're not going to have happy customers. If the communities aren't thriving, you're not going to have much of a business. If the planet's not here, you got nothing. If you don't have a democracy with institutions, you're not going to have a very good business. These things have to be addressed, and companies using their core business and things that are really tight from an ancillary point of view have to be leveraged to do good so that the environment is conducive for business, and then make decisions with a systems thinking mindset. And that'll generate the most valuable company over the long term. The disconnect happens when somebody wants you to just nail a quarter, which frankly, I don't find very interesting. Like, any of us could probably do that. But how do you build a business that's more valuable in 5, 10, 20, and 50 years?
Yeah, to what both Doug and Satya said, we always have stakeholders that are asking for us to hit quarters and hit our numbers. But I think we have a group of stakeholders now that require that we not only have a fiscal responsibility, but also a social responsibility. And I think Satya made the point that you can do both simultaneously. They're not mutually exclusive. And actually, we look at it as, particularly because it's such a big part of our business has to do with a social area, which is the environment and sustainability. We look at it as a differentiator for us, as do these two companies. So I think this actually ends up being those areas that, such as the underemployed for us, or the unemployed, or the environment. Those areas end up being beneficiaries of this ask of our stakeholders that we not just focus on the monetary side or the fiscal side of our business, but we focus on the social side as well. That, by the way, doesn't mean we at WM are going to take a stance on every single social issue that comes across the newswire, but there are some critical ones that we have to step up on.
Yeah, it's interesting. It really is about the overall health of the organization, and the stakeholder transition has been a big piece of that. So we talked a little bit about culture. You each mentioned culture in some way. And when we think about what happened in 2020, any good company, their people were front and center. That's how we got through what we needed to get through. How do you approach making sure that you have that right culture to really transform your business and make sure that we're headed, for a strong 5, 10, 20, 100 years? Maybe to you, Jim?
Well, one of my favorite quotes, and maybe if you ask me which company has a great culture, I always think of Southwest Airlines. I think they do have a great culture, and it goes all the way back to their founder, Herb Kelleher. And one of my favorite quotes by Herb was that I put my people first, then my customers, and then my shareholders. And if you put them in that order, then the formula works. And I think by putting them in that order, you really do develop a great culture. And so as I think about WM, I think about our people first strategy or our people first initiative. And I think that has to stand the test of time. We have to continue to put our people first. And it's not that we're doing it at the expense of our shareholders or our customers, but to Herb's point, if you put them in the right order, it really works well.
How about you, Doug?
Yeah, the framework that goes through my mind is purpose, values, and culture. And I define culture as the behaviors that happen in the real world every day. And we all inherited cultures from the founders and the leaders before us. But like it or not, we get to shape what happens next. And people are watching what we do as much as maybe more than what they're listening to what we say. And so we need to model what we want the output to be all the time and reward it, celebrate it, tell stories, refresh it, and aim it at the strategy of the company so that it helps carry you to where you're trying to go. And that's the fun part of it, is that these are people businesses. I mean, Satya's in a technology business, but I bet you tell you he's in the people business, because it's the people that build the tech. We're all leaders of people, and so this behavioral question's a big one.
No, absolutely. I think Doug captures it, because to me, that sense of purpose and mission give you the why, and then the culture gives you the how. And then, of course, that helps you get a lot of other things like the what of the business, the strategy and the execution. But without the why and the how, the chances of you getting a lot of things right are going to be low. And so that's been a lot of my focus even, and Doug said it, which is, as a successful company taking over from people who have more had founder status at the company, I had to sort of, as a mere mortal CEO, get much more focused on reinforcing that sense of purpose and culture as first-class things. And quite frankly, I must say, whatever, now close to 7 years, I'm much more, I would say, enlightened to the importance of what Doug said, which is ultimately we're all about, it's about people and their lived experience every day, feeling that it is aligned with our mission and our culture.
That's great. Well, we have time for one more question, and I thought I would bring forward the theme of the overall WM Sustainability Forum this year, which is breakthrough. And what we're trying to do is really think about these problems and how do we break through exponentially to drive really a strong, meaningful, lasting change. And so when you think about the environment and some of the problems that we have to tackle, perhaps you can just share with us what you see as sort of hopeful and optimistic in your words, Satya, as your word for the next 5 to 10 years. What do you see in the next 5 to 10 years on the horizon for the environment?
For us, for example, the place where we need to just make sure that we're doing the very best work is in our data center and the data center designs, so that we can be all of the things that we aspire to be, which is carbon neutral, carbon negative, zero waste, and water positive even. And we have some new designs which are now in Northern Europe, which we are very, very excited about, and we want to propagate that broadly. And beyond that, though, we even have invested our capital towards an innovation fund. We're looking for great partners in there. Carbon removal is going to be one of the big areas we're going to be tracking. Recently, we are working with Climeworks, which where they are really having they have a plant in Iceland around carbon removal that's showing a lot of promise. So we are doubling down on that. In Asia, we are focused and working with Southeast Asian clean energy facility to accelerate their their deployments in some of the carbon removal and other technologies. And overall, I'd say our goal would be to be able to look for any technology that speeds up our own transition to clean energy, but also more broadly, any carbon recapture could be the big breakthroughs. But we'll look broadly around what breakthroughs come through.
Great. Doug?
Yeah, I just pick up on carbon as well. I think that's a central focus for a lot of us. And we've got this Project Gigaton work going on with the 2,300 suppliers, where we've committed to take a gigaton out of our supply chain in terms of greenhouse gas emissions, and we're on track to achieve that. And that's going to be really important. I think bigger picture, the fact that more and more people care about this subject is really helpful to us. And we have a big challenge, if you think about raw materials through to the customer, to design the entire supply chain in a way that is more sustainable without raising prices. A lot of Americans are under pricing pressure, of course, and they don't want to pay more for something that's more sustainable, and most of the time they won't. So we have to think through the engineering of the entire supply chain to figure out how to remove that trade-off so that the item that's of most value to them is also the most sustainable item. So one of the things that gives me optimism is I think that more and more people care about this issue. They're more engaged, and that pressure is a healthy pressure that, when applied to retailers and suppliers, will generate an even better outcome.
So I love the word optimism. It's one of my favorite words, and some people have described me as being an optimistic person. I take that as a huge compliment. I am optimistic. 2020 was a tough year for everybody, but I am optimistic. We're using technology. I think we learned so much about technology, whether it's the application of technology, as we discussed, the Teams product and helping us with communication. We will continue to do that long after COVID is in the rearview mirror. But I think the application of technology on the sustainable side of our business, whether it is carbon reduction, whether it's improving the yields of our recycle plants, all of those are areas where we can apply technology and where we can really learn lessons from 2020. If we come out of this year without learning anything, then shame on us. And I think we have learned a lot, and it's thanks to collaboration with companies like this. And so I just want to finish again with thanking both of you for joining us. I think Satya, you actually have earnings today, which is amazing that you were on today. But thank you very much for doing this. And Tara, I'll turn it back to you.
Yes, thank you, all three of you. And I know our audience feels the same way. I think we're hopeful and optimistic about the future because we have the three of you at the helm of some of the largest corporations in the country and the world. So thank you so much for your time and your insights. Jim, before you go, we have some questions from our youth audience. Here you go.
Hi, my name is Gitanjali Rao, and most natural resources are finite, and usage is only increasing, causing some of the environmental harm that we're already seeing. So while we've made some excellent strides in pivoting to conservation, recycling, and education, we still see some massive leaps in innovation to recover from the damage that we've already done. Looking ahead, how are you investing in technologies, namely nanomaterials, quantum computing, biotechnology, etc., to reduce the environmental impact of the products we use and the services we consume?
Thanks, Gitanjali. Great question. I think you should be on our next earnings call asking questions. As far as the investment in technology, we're making significant investments in technology. We're making investments in anaerobic digestion technology. We've got 4 plants now spread around the United States. We're also making investments in advanced optical sorting technology that will improve the yield out of our recycling plants. We're excited about the prospects for all of these investments in technology, and while they may not be to the level of nanomaterials, I guess, we do believe that there's significant opportunity for investment in technology in our space.
Hello, my name is Nancy Nakinati, a second-year master's student studying sports product management at the University of Oregon. My question is for Jim Fish. I've come to understand that sustainability is a global effort, and I appreciate how loud and grounded it is in the US. Are there any collaborative efforts with other companies outside the US? If yes, can you talk about these actions? Thank you.
Thanks, Narki, for your question. We've got 3 big multinational companies represented in this year's forum, specifically Walmart, Microsoft, and PepsiCo. And so part of the way we impact the entire world, even though Waste Management is really just a North American company, it's the purpose of this forum, to have a conversation and that then results in a call to action for big companies that can make changes, lasting changes across the world. And those 3 companies, along with Waste Management, can help to do that.